Alright, this is about 10 different photographs of these rocks. And what you want to avoid if you use Meshroom is this type of depth of field blurring that you can see where you get too close to the subject and then the background starts to blur some. Meshroom will tolerate some of it, but you want to try to avoid it if you can. Just take pictures from farther back. See, you can see it's blurry over here too. Now I sent all these into Meshroom and this is the finished render. Which the only part that actually didn't turn out great is the top here. I just didn't have enough pictures. I should have maybe took a couple more from like these angles. Maybe one here would have been better. Looking at them back, I only really had one top view and not enough to give it enough information for that. But this is the model here, and all I did is loaded Meshroom, drag that folder into the images here, save the file and hit start. It went through and did all the steps. You'll click on the last step, the texturing here, and you'll come down to the bottom and you'll see where the mesh is stored. Now, I can't remember that, so I just copy that to the clipboard and then go into Blender and import in the OBJ from that clipboard location. Import OBJ, paste, hit enter, and there it is. Depending on how complex the mesh is, it takes a while to load in sometimes. I'll delete this cube, delete the camera, delete the light. I'm gonna set the origin to the 3D cursor and then set origin geometry to origin. That'll place it there in the middle. And then go to these different views and rotate it so that it's facing the right way. It'll never come in here the way you think it will. It'll always be upside down and sideways. Now, I already planned on removing the wall in the floor from the image. From the scene rather. So what I'll do, I'll get it pretty much centered. I'll go into edit mode and turn on X-ray so that it gets on the front and the back of everything. And go through, delete the vertices, and go to the bottom view. And I'm probably going to be chopping off more than I want to. Just means this mesh will be in the ground somewhat. That's all it'll mean. I didn't exactly rotate it perfectly level, so that didn't help either. So let's get back out of this mode, and now we got our rock pile, which I ain't crazy about that either, but what can you do? So clearly this is too many polygons for the game. You could run it this many, but you don't want to do that. So what I'll do is duplicate it. I'll first name this high, so I know it's a high poly model. Then I'll duplicate it with Shift D and right click, and then name this one low. Now since you duplicated it, it's going to share the same material. So you got to go into the shading here, pick the low object, and right here say add new material. And this is where you'll give it your new material name, Rockpile 1, for example. And then over here in the texture, what you'll do is say new image. Now I'll start with like 1024 by 1024 because it's quicker to render. And you don't need the alpha for the diffuse. I'll say OK. I'll leave the color space to sRGB for the diffuse map, but you'll see it turn black because we haven't rendered it yet. Alright, so next thing I'll do is get out of this mode, and I'll pick the low poly rocks here, the low poly. I'll go to edit mode. No, I'm sorry, I missed a step. Crap. Back to object mode. Pick the low poly rocks and add a decimate. Alright, it's 172,000 poly, so I'm going to tell the ratio to be 0.01. And that brought us down to 1,700 polys. Apply. Now, this is important. With the low poly model that you just decimated, go to edit mode, hit A to select all, and UV unwrap. Seams need to be added. Crap. Alright, sometimes that happens, so we'll do smart UV project. Island margin 0.01. Okay, let's look at the UV map. Look, it just cut that crap into like all these little fragments. I hate that. Don't know why it didn't unwrap the other way. Well, let's undo that. That's what it should have did. Oh, we're going to use that one. Even though it had problems, we're going to still use it, because that's better. Now, we got to go to Render Engine and change it to Cycles. Change it to GPU Compute. Go back to Shading. Now, this is the part you got to... Also, we'll pick both of these objects, and you can do that in here in shading. You want to tell it to shade smooth, both of them. Alright, now you pick the high object over here. You can pick it here, but then you hold shift and you left click in here to select the low object. You go to here, you say bake. You turn this to diffuse, turn off the direct and indirect contributions of the light influence, and select active, undo this, tell max ray distance to be 1, and you can start with 0.1 for extrusion is a good starting point, and bake. Over here you'll see the new rocks texture appear. And that's a damn good bake. That's a very good bake. So now I know that worked pretty well. I'm going to say new image and make this one 2048 by 2048. Alright, now I'm going to name it what I'm going to name it when I save it, which will be Rockpile 1 _ D for diffuse and rebake. Now we'll get a higher resolution image, which 1024 probably would have worked for this, but I usually try to do 2048 at least. Alright, see, that's a little better. Alright, right here, image, save as. Now this is the part that's probably different than other people usually do, but I'll make a folder, and this folder will be where my mesh is going to go and my textures. Which I'll save this as a PNG. Make sure the color depth is 8. You can take off the compression for better quality and save as image. Now we're going to add a vector normal map. Now we're going to add a texture, image texture. We're going to say new, and this one is going to be called Rockpile 1 underscore N for normal map. Okay, change the color space to linear. Connect the color to the color, and then connect the normal to the normal here. Now over here in the bake things, which is, remember here in render properties, the bake tab here, you're going to change this to normal. And bake. This is what makes a low poly model look like a high poly model. If you don't bake it and all you did was just reduce the poly count, it's going to look like crap. So to illustrate what difference this just made, I will show you the high poly model and now show you the low poly model. Almost exactly the same. One is 170 something thousand polygons and one is only 1,700. What makes it look so good are the baked normals here. So now we need to save these normals, save as, and in that same folder, take off compression, save as image. You can change that back if you want, but it's not necessary because what we're going to do next is go into layout mode. You can save the file here if you want, save it as a Blender file, whatever you want to call it. And just to compare, there's the high poly and there's the low poly model. High poly, low poly. High poly, low poly. Now we can delete the high poly model. Now what I would recommend, this is what I do for stuff like this, so that you don't puncture tires over little sharp points or points that are invalid, meaning like they're less than 2 millimeters in thickness. You don't want the car to snag on it. So what I'll do for something like this is I'll add a mesh plane. I will go into edit mode and I will edge subdivide and put in about, I don't know, 25 subdivisions. That's good. Now I go back to object mode. I'm just going to move this up and I'm going to shrink wrap it. The modifier, shrink wrap. I'm going to pick the rock pile, and as you can see, that didn't wrap worth crap. So outside surface, nearest vertex. Let's scale it larger. I just hit the S key on the keyboard and I'm just scaling it larger. Alright, so this is our collision mesh for those rocks basically, which will not puncture the tires. Yes, some of the tires will probably look like they go into the rock some, but that's just a trade-off. You can try some of these different settings in here for like maybe you can get a better. I mean, I usually just use the nearest vertex and just, you know, that seems to work pretty good for me. So that'll be the collision mesh basically. So I'll apply this. I'll double click this and I'll call it COLMESH-1. I'll rename this low to Rockpile. You don't have to, it's up to you. Rockpile 1. Now both of these objects, I'm going to select them both. I'm going to say object, set origin to 3D cursor, object, apply all transforms, and I'm going to import in a model from the game of the hopper. Now I know what the size of these rocks will be in relation to the car. So I want to make them larger than that, which is actually a lot larger than what they really are in real life, but that's where I want them, right there. Now I'm going to add 2 empty plain axes. These are like folders, basically. So we're going to call one base 0, 0 and the other start 0, 1. I'm going to hold shift, left click, drag and drop start in the base, and then I'm going to open up base, and then I'm going to click the mesh in the rock pile, the collision mesh and rock pile, hold shift, left click, drag and drop into there. Now if you want your object to perform better, it's best to convert PNGs and DDS files, which I use GIMP to do that. So this new folder here, we'll take both of these textures and drop them in the GIMP, and I'll say file, export as, and in that same folder I'll just rename the PNG to DDS. For the diffuse map, you'll pick compression type BC1 and say generate bitmaps, export. You can also, for this, if you want, you can go to colors, image, mode, grayscale, file, export as, and put a little S next to the dash for specular. Generate bitmaps, BC1. Now for the normal map, this one, file, export as, .dds, and this time you're going to pick compression type 5, BC5. Generate bitmaps, export. Alright, now in Blender, just to avoid any problems, I will go to the image here, and where this base color is, I will simply load in that DDS file into Blender. That way it writes the DAE file with the DDS file. It's not looking for a PNG file. You won't have any issues. Sometimes you still do. It happens, but not all the time. So now we're ready to export our collision mesh and our mesh into that folder as a DAE. Collida DAE. We'll find that folder, new folder 1, rockpile1.dae. You don't have to let it copy the textures since you've already put them in there. Just export Collida. Now what you'll do is take a material file like this one. Actually, you know what? Let me grab one out of here. I have a different one I want to use. You can write your own main.materials.json. You can actually make these materials in the game if you don't want to make it this way. I prefer this method because it just does it beforehand, as the game loads, it makes it. Let's see, the one I used earlier. That video didn't get posted. Paste. Alright, so the texture that we made in Blender, the one that's going to be looking for in the game, is going to be what we call Rockpile 1. Not the -D or anything like that. This is where it's just going to ask for Rockpile 1. Alright, we'll copy and paste that here and here. Alright, we don't need a second or third texture, so I'm going to take those out. So we just have one texture here. Now the color map is the diffuse. So the color map is rockpile1_.d.dds. It's easier just to say rename it, copy it to the clipboard, and then right here just paste it, then you know you didn't mess up. Now I happen to know that the normal map has got an N, so I'll just change the D to an N, and the specular map's got an S. That is the detail map. Put the wrong one in there. That's supposed to be the normal map. I put it in the wrong slot. I'll show you how you can make a normal map though. I mean a detail map. You can, in your GIMP program, if you're using the GIMP, you go to Filters, Enhance, High Pass, and do a high pass filter. Say OK, File, Export As, and just put like a HP, so you know that's high pass filter, or detail, whatever you want to put. BC1 compression type, generate bitmaps. Alright. See, that'd be high pass for high pass filter. That gives the texture more of an outline look, kind of highlights the details basically of the lines, like edge detect does, like in Photoshop where you can edge detect and get the edges and stuff, but kind of different little. Alright, the detailed normal map and a normal map. The difference is a detailed normal map accompanies the detailed map, but you can still use it without a detailed map. It just basically acts like a doubler, where you just get twice as much normal map look. Use anastrophic filtering, true, unless you got a video card that you just, for whatever reason, don't use it. Because you don't have enough memory, I'd say you wouldn't use it for that case. Save material. Now we can copy this folder. Since it's got its own materials file, all we have to do, I want to rename the folder though to Rockpile1. We'll copy this folder, and I'm going to drop it in a level that I want to use it in. Which I'm going to put it, let's see, levels, level, this now, the level name PBR, that's just the name I gave the level. In the art folder, I'll paste this folder. I already have another Rockpile, but this is Rockpile1. You can also delete the PNG files now. That's going to take a lot of room up if you don't. I just happened to glance. It was like 36 megs. Now taking them out, it's only 13 megs. Let's load the game. Load that level, and in the asset browser, we'll have a Rockpile1 in there. And if you want to move that Rockpile to any other level, you can by just moving the folder. Where is it? Now, alternatively, you could have just loaded the game. As soon as the game loaded, you could have hit F11. Damn, my game gonna crash on me or what? No. You could have came to Material Editor, and you could just said New Material, and in here, you could have put Rockpile1 and went to Create, and then you would have gone through the different materials, and you would have just manually loaded in each of the different materials and the different slots. So I don't like doing it that way. I do it the other way. Oops. Alright, so Window Asset Browser. Now over here in your asset browser, in your art folder, you should see the other folder, Rockpile 1. And you just left click, drag, and drop, and there are your rocks. And we're waiting. There we go. Now, I did make these with not the intent of showing the back. You know, I had made these with the idea of them being against something, like a bank or something of that sort. But you go into the material editor for this object. Where's my material editor? Why isn't it loading the damn materials? I may have to reinstall again, folks. Air object Rockpile. Oh, I was showing y'all the alternative way to make it, and I screwed up the damn material. How do I undo that? Crap, I don't want that. Alright, so there's our maps. As you can see, you could have just made it that way and plugged them in here by manually picking them. Just be sure that if you make the material this way, that you do it before you try to import in your mesh, or it's going to be red. That's not a problem really. I mean, you can still make it if it's red. You just have to save the game, reload the game for it to fix the red. Lighting, see, roughness. Now, if I get rid of these normal maps and show you what this rock pile looks like without the normal maps, it actually doesn't look that bad. But the normal maps just give it another layer of a three-dimensional look. I'll sometimes take the detail map out, see how it looks without the detail map. But in this case, the detail map actually makes it look pretty sharp. Now, to run into it, you have to rebuild collisions. So I'm going to bring the car over here. So reset him. It's on fire. And you'll see that the collision mesh works. There's not really a lot more to say about it. It's just a low polygon object that looks like a high polygon object, which you can use to decorate like riverbanks or whatever. Which, you know, these are scaled larger than what they are in real life. Obviously, these rocks are very small. Like, you know, you could put like 20 in the palm of your hand. But pretty low poly. You shouldn't have any problems with popping tires or anything, because you can load in the you get rid of that. You can load in the or show the where's ground model debug? Forget where it is. Ground model debug, static, and it shows you the collision mesh. That's why we shrunk wrap it. But anyway, if anybody wants this little model of these rocks, I'm gonna zip them up and put them on OneDrive and have at it. Do whatever you want with them. I don't care. Oh, when you do the baking in Blender, remember when we were baking, I was using this extrusion and max ray distance. Sometimes you got to mess with the extrusion. Just try different ones. Sometimes 0, sometimes 0.1, sometimes 0.3. Um, I don't really know how to explain it. There's other videos on baking on the internet that really explain this well. Uh, you'll know if you have a bad bake if like most of it is like yellow, or if it's missing and it's got holes all in it. Um, but I don't want to make this video extremely long. If you try to do this and you have these issues, I can make a video on, or I can tell you a better video that can explain baking. I personally like this guy's stuff here. I think it's Grant Abbott is his name. He does a great job explaining what normals. To find him. There it is, Grant Abbott. You can search bake normal map, bake normals, and he basically has one. Now I can't figure out this method he uses with the cage, but this is actually the method that developers use. But this is how I learned how to bake stuff. Basically, was watching his video on how to do it. This one, like with tree bark, and like I said, these he does a better job explaining baking than I could explain.